Tantalus Productions presents the Killer Score Podcast.
Hey, that's us. Welcome back to Killer Score, the podcast where we look at cult classic films with cult soundtracks that we just think kind of slap and we want to share them with you. This is our finale for anime, even though we carried over into June. Sorry, we've been busy and we're going to be busy in the upcoming week, so we'll be taking a little mini hiatus. Won't be super long, but we won't be uploading again like in a week or so, basically, you know?
Possibly a month. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how long it takes. We're not going to be away for like several months or something, though, so don't worry about that. All right, so this final episode for anime is going to be Richie's pick. We already watched 5 centimeters per second, and we did Redline, and now we are going to finish it up with Richie's pick. Richie, care to tell us what it is?
Yep, Richie here. And I am excited for this one because in the past days of anime, now Annie June, we covered some different movies in tone. We had a slice of life romance. We had a high-octane sci-fi action sports racing anime. And this time we're gonna bring it pretty dark on the dial because we are going to be covering the second film to cover the eponymous hero of Hideyuki Kikuchi's famous light novel series, Vampire Hunter D, Bloodlust.
Yeah, it's one of the earlier things I can remember hearing getting localized for like the earlier like stages of anime coming over here and starting to take off a bit. I mean, obviously most people think like earliest anime to take off over in the States, they think like Speed Racer, but you know, this is after Akira came out and we started to get that like surge of like, you know, like more adult anime products coming out.
And there's an interesting history behind both the first movie and the second movie that I'm going to get into, but I wanted to open this up with a little introduction because the research I have done for this movie is actually really insane. I put ghost dog levels of research into this.
Oh, damn.
But as a little opening thing, I want to start us out by preface by saying vampires are surprisingly everywhere in anime. They've got a long history.
Oh, yeah.
To varying degrees of quality and success, but anime loves vampires. So,
Do vampires love anime?
Good question.
If there's anything Bloodlust has taught us, yes.
Fair enough. Or even if you want to look at some newer stuff, you know, the vampire dies in no time also shows that.
I'd say that this is probably my favorite vampire-based anime thing, but I want to hear what yours are if you have any vampire anime favorites.
Okay, so I know it's kind of common core, but I don't care. It slaps, and even if the vampires are like way unconventional in a lot of ways, it's got to be Hellsing Ultimate for me.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't not love Alucard, and you know, like the guy who like does Hellsing, what is it?
Kota Hirano?
Hirano, yeah. Hirano just knows how to draw guns, man. And, you know, it's just a cool thing to watch.
Borders on fetishistic, but hey, I'm not complaining. Those are cool gun designs.
I mean, Hirano literally worked with, like, porn before he got into, like, Hellsing and stuff.
Fair enough.
Which explains the drawings.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
It has one of the best dubs ever, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, whether it's the original, Jinx, you owe me a soda.
Here.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That was quick. Whether it be the original Hellsing or even Ultimate, like the original Hellsing has some problems, but one of them is not the soundtrack. That's really phenomenal.
Now, Erin, you got a favorite?
I just said also Hellsing Ultimate.
Oh. Whoops. I got a bit distracted by the intro, but that was my way of getting everyone into this. But before we get into this specifically, there's a story to tell, and it basically answers a question that I might have had, or other anime fans might have had. What if you took some of the best anime directors and animators and writers in both Madhouse and the greater scope, and paired them with a localization process that was very distinctly American in the best of ways? I say in the best of ways because, unlike prior efforts from, say, the likes of Streamline or Harmony Gold, the distribution company behind this movie had a lot more faith in the power of adult anime than its contemporaries. Which brings us to the story of Urban Vision.
Oh, I'm not actually familiar with that studio.
They were kind of a strange outlier in terms of output and overall prominence, but they were probably most famous for putting out a lot of works from Yoshiaki Kawajiri, namely Wicked City and the series adaptation of Ninja Scroll.
Oh, nice.
Oh, okay.
There is a weird sort of fluctuation in quality between all of them, but I think that their output overall is just pretty good and memorable. I think my favorite thing by them is that they've dubbed is Pet Shop of Horrors, if you've ever seen that little series.
I've read a bit of the manga, and oh wow, they've done some of the Golgo 13 stuff.
Yeah, they pretty much had the monopoly over the Golgo 13 series of OVAs and movies.
And the very, very obscure Final Fantasy V anime.
Yep. Legend of the Crystals.
Yeah, that thing is obscure as hell.
They even had Gatchaman before Sentai took it over upon their closing.
Yeah, some decent stuff, but like I've said before, that could be said of all like the anime distributors and like dubbers of like that era. Like, your quality was going to be all over the place.
And thanks to the history surrounding Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, there was a lot of pedigree behind the dubbing and the making of this movie. In fact, and this is what's gonna bake your noodle, the English dub of this...
Bake your noodle?
I'm old. I'm mentally 60, okay?
I'll let that go.
I haven't even heard that one before.
My mind is an endless void of strange nomenclature. Anyway, back on track. Here's what's gonna blow your minds. The English dub is not a dub. They had done the English voice acting before the Japanese cast ever recorded the dialogue for this.
Ah, so it's kind of like a Space Dandy situation.
Yes. And in fact, when the movie was first released in Japan, it was released with English audio and Japanese subtitles.
Oh, wow.
And the whole process was fairly interesting because it was something of a mix of dubbing and prelay, which, of course, is when they talk and they animate over that.
Yeah, so do we have any info on why they did it this way instead as opposed to the traditional way?
Well, several things, actually. One was the overseas success of a lot of Yoshiaki Kawajiri's previous films.
Yeah, I mean, Ninja Scroll blew up over there.
Ninja Scroll and even the less successful Wicked City had its fans, and by fans I mean masturbators. Hey, who said that?
I mean, it was a lot of old Taku's gateway into like the more violent scopes of anime. It was that or like, Akira.
I personally wouldn't say Wicked City is the best thing ever, but it's got a dark, moody color palette, great action scenes, and a semi-decent dub, actually.
Yeah, I mean, even the old Akira dub has like its ups and downs. There's some solid gems in that old dub.
That said, Wally Burr, may he rest in peace. What the hell kind of direction did he give Cam Clark?
Yeah, Cam really didn't shine in that.
Cam, I love you. You are kind of my biggest inspiration for voice acting, but every actor has their bad performances.
Yeah.
Look at Old Timers for me, and that one is kind of a low point for you.
Yeah, so who do we got for the soundtrack for this? Like, what's the score done by?
So this is where that whole co-production thing becomes a relevant point. This movie's music was done by Marco D'Ambrosio, who is probably most famous for doing the music for the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure OVA back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And essentially nothing else.
Oh, jeez.
I actually had a hard time finding any other samples of his work save for some lesser-known OVAs, which is weird because he appeared, I kid you not, in the behind-the-scenes mini-documentary that accompanied this movie. Like, he even talked about scoring scenes and watching the animation before coming up with the music.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will tend to do that with animation projects. There are exceptions, but yeah.
But yeah, long story short, Urban Vision had done licensing stuff for Kawajiri movies before, and had seen what success had come from the first Vampire Hunter D movie, which wasn't directed by him, strangely enough, and I've got to say is not the best thing ever. For context, Vampire Hunter D is a series of light novels by Hideyuki Kikuchi, a Japanese author known for a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Like The Wind Named Amnesia, and also, funny enough, the Wicked City books. And the problem with the first movie is that it takes a novel-length story, a light novel-length story, and truncates it pretty badly.
Oh, no.
Let's put it this way.
That never works well.
It never
Never.
works well.
And let's put it this way. This world is a post-apocalypse story. A post-nuclear story about a future where vampires basically rule the world and have extended their influence to the point where they have brought the fashion sense back to Victorian English times.
You have my attention, you have my attention, you have my attention, you have my attention.
We gotta get a camera. Erin's face just perked up.
The other thing I was gonna mention is, besides you have my attention, is when you say truncating, do you mean as bad as like the Tales from Earthsea movie?
Not quite as bad, because they had the decency to adapt the first story arc from the first book.
Okay.
But the pacing is just not good.
Yeah, because Earthsea was just like, we're just gonna try to like mash
like,
together the series.
The series of what, like at least 5 or 6 books?
Yeah, I mean, and if you're even just talking the original Earthsea cycle, that's 3 books.
It's 3 books in a 90-minute movie.
Yeah.
So, the problem with the first movie is that it took way too goddamn long on some scenes and some shots, and then sped up all the action scenes. It's like, he's riding a horse. He's riding a horse. Flash forward to another action scene where he goes to the vampire's castle. Let's go, let's go.
Oof.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's why I didn't cover that one. That and the fact that this movie is 10 times better.
So did we have, we just had one composer on this, or were there multiple composers?
Marco D'Ambrosio is the only one that I picked up from the documentary and from the extensive research I've done on it. But one more thing I want to note before we begin is the localization process and the dub. This anime has a eclectic cast. Some who have done anime, some who have only done anime on the side, and are mainly used to Western cartoons, and others who have never done anime at all.
Oh boy.
Oh, but do not worry, because it's actually good. The dub
Okay.
is very good, and you'll see very quickly who my favorite performances are. And now that I have Erin's attention, I'm gonna get Dalton's by mentioning that half the cast of Final Fantasy X is in this game.
Wait, what?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, seriously. We have Matt McKenzie, Auron.
Yep.
We have John DiMaggio,
Oh,
voicing a lot of characters in this, actually. We've got, I think Hetty Buress pops up at one point.
okay.
And this is going to be real funny. I want to see if you can spot her. Pamela Adlon.
Huh.
Do you know who that is?
Rings a bell.
Bobby Hill.
That's good. That's good.
Also speaking of King of the Hill, if you can find it on YouTube, watch the I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep a straight face while saying this. Watch the French-Canadian dub of King of the Hill. It's hilarious.
That's probably the most giggly I've seen Erin since my argument with Dalton and Walk Hard.
I'm just remembering too the fact that they renamed Boomhauer in that version.
What's his name?
I believe it's Jean-Pierre.
On that note, yeah. So this is
Just do yourself a favor and look up Quebecois Boomhauer. He's amazing, and for some reason, Bobby sounds like a 40-year-old smoker.
He's been smoking for 30 of those years.
Yeah.
Anyway, this movie's got an interesting history because it's seldom brought up by a whole lot of people, but the people who do bring it up tend to really, really like it for its atmosphere, for especially the dark shots of a gothic castle juxtaposed by the post-apocalyptic environments. And I especially love the opening shots. I was trying to get a picture of Erin's indescribable that's a Dracula face there too, funny enough. Oh, that's an evil villain glare there. That was
I was drinking.
Everyone, man, you two were really giggly this episode.
I'm excited for this one though because it
For context, marijuana was legalized in New Jersey. No, I'm kidding. I mean, it was, but we haven't partaken in any.
Yeah, anyway.
Yet.
But I really do like this movie. It's a simpler one, but it's a good execution of the premise of the vampire hunter who travels a post-apocalyptic world and still has to rely on comparatively primitive technology. The original movie didn't really handle the premise well because that juxtaposition was not established well, but this one, I think, captures it pretty well. It's not super exposition heavy, so you might be asking me a lot of questions, but it is really good at just weaving stuff into the environments and the quieter scenes.
Huh.
And
I think the word you're looking for is atmosphere.
I'm covering a lot of ground, Erin. Do you know how many times I watched that documentary to get my facts straight?
Yeah, I figured.
Fair enough.
But yeah, and the best part is I didn't have to go sifting through my garage for the old DVD copy that I had because, I'm not gonna share any links or anything so people don't take it down, but it's actually free on YouTube.
Oh,
English dub and all.
all right.
Alright.
So, you got anything else you want to roll by us before we get into this?
I think most of the behind-the-scenes stuff is something we can cover in screening.
All right.
So, I've got my dinky little laptop over here, and we're about to watch Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. And we're back on Killer Score after screening Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. So this movie is probably the one that I have rewatched the most out of all the out of all the subjects of an episode that I have introduced us to. Right after Near Dark and Walk Hard. But as with all the previous times, I loved this atmospheric, action-packed, wonderfully dubbed and animated and composed masterpiece of vampire anime. I say masterpiece because, well, it's good. It's a good example of its own genre, and we're going to discuss that in depth in just a moment. Before we do, however, I'd love to hear my co-host's impressions of this Hideyuki Kikuchi adaptation.
I thought it was pretty dang good. I really liked a lot of the character design work. That's probably my favorite part of it. I mean, when you've got designs that were originally illustrated by Yoshitaka Amano, it's hard not to...
Of Final Fantasy fame, for context?
Yes, of the original, like, the design work for, like, the first 9 games. Like, even 10, I think.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah.
He did 10.
But, you know, obviously, as we've gone on, Nomura took over the design work a bit more.
A little bit.
Yeah. Like, famously, Nomura basically came up with the final designs for, like, most of the games after the first 6.
Yeah.
But, no, I thought the design work was really good. The animation was gorgeous. It's very distinctively late 90s, early 2000s anime, which, you know, I kind of missed that aesthetic a bit, so it was cool to see it again.
Especially the use of darkness.
Yeah. And, yeah, overall the dub was good, and the score was very fun, you know, very, very cinematic score, which felt right, and, you know, it goes from, like, it's mostly symphonic, I would say.
Yeah, very symphonic.
Yeah, it's a very symphonic score, but it works.
Orchestral.
Yeah, it's a very symphonic, very orchestral score, very lot of swelling stuff, but a lot of moody stuff. It works well for the subject matter.
Especially for something that borders on gothic horror in a lot of its moments.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually a big inspiration for Bloodborne.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I know one of the biggest inspirations for Bloodborne, was, aside from that, was like Castlevania and the specifically the Innistrad expansion of Magic the Gathering was a really big inspiration.
Before we continue, however, this episode of Killer Score was brought to you by Hammers. It was a strange thing. I woke up with a big headache and went to the bathroom mirror and saw a big nail impression on my forehead. Disappeared the next day.
That's weird.
Yeah, a little bit. But, more on our Lovecraftian sponsors later. Friends, let's hear what Erin has to say.
So, I thought the movie was good. It took me a little bit to get, like, fully invested in it, but that's probably my own reasons, outside of the podcast. But, Richie, you lied. You said there was Victorian costuming in this movie. You lied.
I don't know shit about history.
Yeah, he doesn't know costuming.
He doesn't know costuming. Because everything in here is, like, futuristic meets gothic Lolita.
Tell me you didn't have fun with it.
I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I was just like, Richie, you lied.
I fucked up. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I enjoyed the movie. Voice acting was great. The animation was beautiful. What else? As we mentioned, as Dalton said, the soundtrack is very orchestral in its sound. The score is just, it's very, I don't want to use the word appropriately used, because it was obviously written for this, but the way that they use the score just works out perfectly to the film's benefit.
Oh, it's well timed.
It just fits.
It just fits. As for another thing that I was going to mention in the movie is a lot of gothic architecture, which is something I can get behind. At one point, I made a joke while watching a movie about Victor Hugo. Yeah. If you ever read Victor Hugo, I tip my hat to you, because he just goes on tangents about architecture for about 400 pages.
I mean, honestly, you could accuse Gaston Leroux of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, Gaston Leroux definitely did the same thing.
You're like, oh man, I want to hear more about this opera ghost. But let me tell you about the structure of this theater.
Let me tell you about how there's a lake underneath the theater.
Let me tell you how this came to be. I bet you're really interested in that. It's kinda, but okay, here's the next 5 pages. It's
Here- We also mentioned Dracula while watching this movie.
yeah.
And for context, we mean the Francis Ford Coppola text-faithful version of Dracula.
And also the book, because at one point we were talking about chicken paprikash recipes.
Yeah, because literally, like, there's like Jonathan Harker, the himbo that he is basically just like, oh man, some weird shit's going on. It must be nightmares from the paprika.
But anyway, I love the use of architecture in this movie. I also love, like, its blend of Gothic and Rococo. And if you don't know what Rococo is, just look it up on Wikipedia, because I can't really explain it besides 18th century opulence. That's enough of me rambling.
So, like I said, there's a lot more actual Victorian costuming for a certain nerd in this crew who was mad at me in the first movie, but I picked this one because it's just straight up better. It's animated better, it's written better.
How much you want to bet it's not actually Victorian?
I'm gonna place a high bet for that.
Shut
Yeah.
up. Shut up.
This motherfucker probably wouldn't know the difference between Victorian and Edwardian.
Dalton, you're sunburnt and I don't want to hurt you.
Look, I'm saying I enjoyed this, but I couldn't fully get into it because when I'm in pain, I'm distracted a bit.
Yeah. But I do really love the atmosphere of this movie so much. It knows how to have fun. Like, the dub especially kind of leans into the campier aspects of stuff, but something that always strikes me when I'm rewatching it is just how natural the acting is.
Oh yeah.
I think the highlight performances of this cast, there are 3 in particular. I love John Rafter Lee as the vampiric villain, Meyer Link.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, yes, the synopsis, I forgot. This movie is based appropriately enough off of the 2nd or 3rd book, I believe, wherein Dee is hired by a wealthy aristocrat to retrieve his kidnapped daughter from the clutches of a descendant of a vampiric noble known as Meyer Link. He goes on a journey to chase him and her down to his castle and is pursued and rivaled by a company of vampire hunters themselves known as the Marcus Brothers. Along the way, he discovers some truths behind the motivations of the girl, Charlotte, and comes to question whether or not Meyer Link really is the fiend of the night he expected to hunt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I have any, like, gripes with the film, it's just that, like, a lot of the villains aren't very well established.
Yeah, they're The only context we get for them is that they were monster thugs hired to protect Link and a spoiler character that I'll timestamp eventually.
Yeah, and even like Meyerlink himself is not very well like established. We just know like
He's a bad
bits.
vampire.
Yeah.
Is he, though?
Well, that's what they established in the beginning of the movie.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later.
I mean, you can like argue until the cows come home if he's like a real villain or not. But you know, one of those deals. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I thought well, I'm not gonna spoil it, but I thought the ending was nice. I enjoyed the ending.
We'll get into that.
Yeah, and yeah, I just feel like honestly, probably my favorite thing of the whole thing was like the character design work. It's some really interesting design work.
Yeah. I especially like how expressive they are. One thing Yoshiaki Kawajiri has been accused of is kind of having a template. Like, as detailed as his characters can be, you can tell that they have similar body structures at times. But one thing you cannot accuse them of being is static. You would expect you would expect characters of his design work to be more static, but you look at characters like Layla of the Marcus Brothers and Meyer Link, and you see how much emotions they go through, and you begin to remember why Kawajiri is as revered and well remembered as he is. Oh, sorry. I thought
It's
you were
okay.
saying something.
No, I was going to say something. Oh, watch the cord.
New setup.
New setup. Yeah, I love the character designs, and another thing that I was going to mention is how facial expressions are animated.
Yeah.
Because even like the slightest change of how a facial expression is done can mean so much in just what emotion they're trying to portray. Like even lifting an eyebrow or something can just completely change a scene, without people even thinking about it, which is a beautiful thing in animation when it's done well. Because with any type of animation or anime, you have to get those facial expressions down, because you want to be realistic without it being like goofy or over the top in a serious anime such as this.
Exactly. And while I do agree with Daulton that Link himself is light on background, you cannot argue with how the animation and acting carry him.
Yeah. Sure.
There's a line that he has that we'll be covering under spoilers that is kind of typical vampire fare. You know which one I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But John Rafter Lee, a criminally underrated English voice actor who's done work in a lot of 2000s animation and stuff, sells that line. Like, there's a gravity to him that I feel like is kind of lost on modern vampires. Like, how many vampires can you confidently say has that Dracula-esque gravity to their voice?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. I feel like the weakest performance is Andy Philpott as D himself, but it kind of works because he's a subdued character by nature.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a character like D, who's like literally very quiet and speaks only when he needs to, like, there's only so much you can work with.
And speaking of the opposite of stoic, I feel like we gotta talk about Mike McShane as Left Hand. For context, there's a parasite that is sentient that lives in D's left hand.
Yeah, I'm guessing they get into that in other medium and how it came to be.
No, they don't actually.
I'm sorry, they don't?
What?
No. He's just sort of a symbiote that latched itself on to D at some point before the series details come out.
What?
What?
It's a parasite. It's a mutant parasite.
Who was the author again?
Hideyuki Kikuchi.
So Kikuchi must have read the Parasite manga and went, "Oh, that's cool," and then never elaborated.
I mean, post-nuclear future.
Because Parasite came out, the manga came out before D did, because Parasite actually started in like the 80s.
Yeah, I think D was mid-90s.
Yeah.
Like late 80s.
Yeah, so I'm imagining there was probably some Parasite influence.
Yeah, probably. But I do like Left Hand. Like, he's a funny character.
Yeah, he brings some levity to the very gothic, serious fare.
Mike McShane's a good actor to cast as a comic relief character, too. I mean, yeah, you could argue that his performance benefits from the fact that Left Hand isn't always on screen and speaks to D in his mind, so he doesn't have to rely on...
Yeah, you don't always got to match the lip flaps.
But it doesn't change the fact that he gets in some really good improvisations.
True.
Like, the dub lets him...
Go
Have
hog
more
wild.
freedom.
Yeah.
Like, that. I love that one line that's like, yeah, what's the sound of one hand yapping?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna get crucified for this.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Left Hand, I think for how much he's talking, it almost gets a little annoying.
A little bit.
Just a little bit, because partway through the movie, I was just thinking, like, please don't let this guy narrate the entire thing like the original cut of Blade Runner.
He doesn't get
Fair.
He doesn't get that bad, but there were certain points where I was thinking, please don't, please don't, please don't.
If it makes you feel any better, Erin, in the first movie, D outright threatens to
Cut his hand off?
to slice him off,
Oh.
and then Left Hand it goes, okay, shutting up. Kirk Thornton voiced him in that one.
Oh, okay.
Aw, man. It stinks that version's not as good from what you've said, because I love me some Kirk Thornton.
That was one of his earlier roles too, so the voice acting in the first movie is very uneven.
Yeah. I do love me some Kirk Thornton, though. Kirk's great.
It's if only that first movie were paced better. Because you know how this movie being lighter on exposition kind of works to its own advantage in this movie?
How's that? Oh, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, that it works in this movie. Bless you. But in the first movie, it just sort of feels out of left field. For context, do you want to know what kind of monster appears in the first movie?
What kind of monster appears in the first movie?
Dinosaurs.
What? No.
Yeah,
No.
literal dinosaurs.
How about no?
Quack? Quack?
Okay.
What?
Yeah, that. You see why I didn't show you the first movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like one thing I like about both the books and this movie is that the variety is well woven in, unlike in the first movie.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole bunch of monsters. Meyerlink at several points is accompanied by a werewolf and a weird changeling thing that is basically a female version of Absorbing Man. And it really is it really is to this movie's benefit that they're woven in with minimal exposition.
That was the
Yeah.
chair.
You know, speaking of Absorbing Man, you know what I'm wondering about?
What?
So, going on a tangent here, I haven't been keeping up with the Marvel stuff lately, but I've heard that the end of the Loki series hints and introduces Kang the Conqueror, and hints that Kang is going to be the next phase villain, which has just made me go, you can't introduce Kang the Conqueror before Doctor Doom. I'm going to introduce the alternate universe version of a character
Here we go.
before the main line.
Fuse is gonna start dwindling.
That's just how my brain's going right now. But, like, Because you know that, right, Richie? You know that Kang's like a future evil even more evil version of Doctor Doom. Right?
Yeah, I know.
What the heck are they doing? I mean, I already have unpopular opinions on the MCU. I hate their version of Thanos as opposed to the comic version.
We're going right back to the discussion we had in the Eternal Sunshine video.
Yeah. Because, here's the thing. I like how much of a sadomasochistic, prick comic book Thanos is. He revels in being evil.
He wants to fuck death.
Yeah, and he's, constantly tormenting Death, who wants nothing to do with him.
And that's the thing. That's how you do the penance stare thing, honestly. You know how Punisher's immunity to the penance stare of Ghost Rider was bullshit?
It is, because that's not how the penance stare works.
It makes sense for Thanos, though.
Well, it doesn't, because Thanos, it doesn't matter. The penance stare makes you feel the pain of the pain you've caused.
But he gets off on that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it makes sense for a sadomasochist like Thanos. It's yes, more.
I mean, he's so comically evil, and I feel like the MCU's been missing someone who's just, comically evil, you know?
I like Josh Brolin, but he's not an actor you cast for that.
Yeah, and just the fact that, movie Thanos is just no, I'm all about balance. I just want to bring balance to the universe, yada, yada. And it's oh my god, shut the fuck up. Where's the Thanos copter?
We're gonna die.
Where's the guy who literally, will fuck over someone's life just for the hell of it? There's a whole comic book where it's revealed that Thanos shows up every year to ruin one random dude's birthday.
So anyway, this episode was brought to you by Witchin' Crafts. This and many sponsors will appreciate content like ours.
I was gonna do a plug, but the
yeah.
one thing I was going to do before that is, you know how in our early episodes it was always the 6 degrees of Jim Henson?
Yeah.
In season 2, it's the 6 degrees of the MCU.
Yeah.
Me ranting and just getting annoyed by it.
So back to Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, please. So this, we talked about the score, but it amazes me that Marco D'Ambrosio has never really gotten out of anime that much. Because this and the score for the OVA of JoJo are really, really good.
Yeah, you know what's another thing I was thinking of when I was watching this?
What?
I was thinking, man, I'm kind of surprised. I don't know if there are. Maybe they just never made it out of Japan. I'm kind of surprised there's no Vampire Hunter D video games, because
There is one.
Oh, is it?
It's not great.
Oh,
it made it to the States.
Oh, really?
It's a PS1 game.
Oh.
That is essentially a adaptation of this movie.
Okay, how does it play, though?
This is gonna baffle you.
Oh,
let me ask you something. If you were to make a Vampire Hunter D game, what would you make it like?
Okay, so the way I see it, you got two options here. You either go a character action route with a Devil May Cry style.
That was my first choice.
Or you go Metroidvania, specifically the Iga era onwards of Castlevania.
Which makes sense because I'm very convinced that this series has a big influence on Castlevania.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. But let me guess, is it a Resident Evil clone?
Yes.
I had a feeling. I had a feeling.
How did you know that?
That's what I was thinking too.
I was like, what's gonna make sense, but also not make sense?
How did you also come to... Erin, you two
You
have...
said a PS1 game, and that's what first comes to my mind.
Yeah.
You guys have one mind.
Yes.
This was the era of Resident Evil clones, alright?
It's not a good one.
Of course it isn't.
Because, let's put it this way. It's a Resident Evil clone without ranged weapons.
Yeah, to do and not only that, but being a Resident Evil clone requires a character that feels limited. Like a character that you can plausibly be this works for the setting. Like Resident Evil works because even though these are trained individuals. They're still just normal people. Like, you can't do a Resident Evil game as a superhuman.
You can't do it as the sword-wielding Dompier, or Dunpeel, who jumps through the air like he's friggin' Spider-Man.
Yeah, and you can't even say like, oh, like, I know you said like, oh, no ranged weapons, but like you can still do games like that without ranged weapons. I mean, look at the Onimusha series.
Having played the game, I can tell you though that it doesn't work.
Oh no, I don't doubt you. I'm just saying, like, you can do survival horror without ranged weapons, but like,
Onimusha is the best example.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some others that I'm currently forgetting about right now. The Evil Dead Hails to the King game does that a decent amount.
Yeah, it was decent. There was a decent attempt there.
Yeah, there's only been like 2 really good Evil Dead games. It's like Fistful of Boomstick and the current one I hear.
The PS2 one I thought was okay.
Yeah, which PS2 one? There's 2.
The one where you have the Ted Raimi gremlin as your sidekick.
Oh yeah, that one's alright. I was thinking of Fistful of Boomstick, which is the other PS2
What was it? Resurrection, I think?
Yeah. That was the era of video games.
Yeah.
Everything was re.
Retribution, Resurrection, Reignition.
Revenge.
But I like that.
Reignited.
I like Resurrection because it's basically...
Revelations.
Ah!
Look at you, Aaron.
Yeah. Revelatons.
So, I like that PS2 one. It's basically Evil Dead flavored Devil May Cry.
Yeah, so is Fistful of Boomstick, except instead of having a sidekick, it's just like the gimmick of the game is it's like another AU game, but it takes place after Army of Darkness, and it's like, oh, what if like Ash getting back caused a bunch of like portals to time to like fuck up around, so you bounce through timelines and stuff.
And the other, it's funny because that one, the one I was mentioning, is like, what if Evil Dead 2 ended with Ash just getting out of the cabin?
Yeah, and then he gets arrested and yada yada yada.
Yeah, but back to this movie. I think now, since we were delving a bit into Dee's character, is a good time to get into spoilers. Right here at the 47-minute mark, I think.
47:10.
47:10. So, let's talk a bit about the character dynamics, because I think that, other than the excessive dialogue, they're pretty well done.
Yeah.
Daulton had mentioned that Meyerling could have used some establishing, and I do agree, but I do like his angle on the sympathetic vampire.
Yeah, we just could have used some more time with him, I feel.
Yeah.
Because there were certain points where the movie felt a bit rushed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pacing feels a little wonky in this movie.
By the end, anyway. A lot happens in the end.
Yeah, like it feels like the pacing's pretty well done in the beginning, and then like you get towards the middle and it gets kind of wonky.
Yeah, but how about that intro to Link when the zoom out happens from the castle? He goes through the city and all the crucifixes are burnt, melting and bowing at his mere presence. And then he swoops in through the window. Wind blows through Charlotte's hair. He picks her up, and you see that shot of her just floating in the mirror because you cannot see him. You cannot see his reflection.
Yeah, they use that. They use that a lot in this
They
movie.
did use that a lot.
But it's always well framed and well shot, I'd say.
It is. It's just like okay. It was cool the first time. It's getting a little annoying right now.
Yeah. A little bit. But there. Again, I'm going to gush a bit because that shot composition is gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
We've talked a lot about lighting here on Killer Score, but one thing I think goes unexamined is a film's use of darkness.
Yeah, fair point.
And this is probably the best. I said in the last episode that this is the best movie that I've seen that uses digital paint and not digital paint, hand drawn for blackness or approximation thereof.
Yeah, I'd agree.
A lot of good use of shadows, like during the fight with the morphing woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see her change textures to fit the metallic Marcus Brothers van,
Yeah.
and you see her actually adapt to her environment. And it especially becomes apparent that darkness is a strength of this movie when it gets to the end at Link's castle. Or, more accurately, Carmilla's castle.
Yes.
And I think there are a lot of shots I love in this movie, not the least of which is Dee's introduction when his horse rears up and his cape is strewn about like he's Errol Flynn. But
no, continue, because I was going to go on a tangent about Gothic literature, but go ahead.
we'll get there. But I think my favorite shot of that whole movie is the mirror room in Link / Carmilla's castle, when there's a bunch of candles floating on the floor, and Charlotte goes to meet Link, and he spreads his cape out. It's all black except for the inside, which is red, and the two embrace as he closes his cape. I love that. I love the rotating shot and the zoom. It's gorgeous. It's like an animated ballet.
Okay, so now I can talk about, not so much actually Gothic literature, but moreover, I love the fact that they incorporated Carmilla as a character from the novel.
Yes.
As being, because Carmilla is, correct me if I'm wrong, is like the first widely published, basically vampire story.
Pretty much.
Pretty much, because that was published, what, in like the late 17 or early 1800s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about this, so you can go on.
Cool. No, no, I just love that they use characters that aren't as widely used as other vampire fiction in an anime such as Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, because when everyone thinks vampires, they just think Dracula or like the more recent stuff, but but most people don't think of Carmilla.
No,
honestly.
Yeah, and it's like we wouldn't have the modern vampire story without Carmilla.
I do love her utilization here too, because they make her a plot important character. By the time the movie heads into the home stretch, it's revealed that she had been facilitating Link and Charlotte's escape. Because eventually Dee warms up on them, because while he's trying to kill him, she calls out for his name, demonstrating that her affection is genuine and she came to leave with them of her own will. But then it turns out Carmilla's whole plan was a setup. She wanted to use the blood that would inevitably be drawn from her turning into a vampire in order to resurrect her body, as her spirit has been locked into this mansion ever since. And I do love that there's actually a link between her and Dee, because it turns out she used to be Dee's dad's ex-lover, and she has some feelings about that.
Yeah, you know, slight connection there, so there's like a thing there, but my only gripe with that is
Pacing?
like, yeah, well, not only that, my only gripe with that is like Dee seems to not like care that much, which is kind of weird.
To be fair, he is very much established as a stoic, actions over words type person. He's not easily rattled.
I just still feel like that should be something he should at least have some reaction to. It's just like, oh, okay.
You're still a vampire. I still have to kill you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're still here.
But speaking of Final Fantasy, I had mentioned earlier that there's a hilarious amount of overlap of actors.
Yeah.
I like Julia Fletcher as Carmilla.
Mhm.
You might know her as Unaleska. Matt McKenzie sounds like he's having fun as Borgoff.
Yeah, he
too.
does.
Oh yeah.
He gets to be the laid-back I'm gonna have fun killing vampires type guy.
Yeah.
Richie, when you first mentioned to me that you were doing Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, I wasn't really that familiar with it, but you also mentioned Near Dark when we were talking about this.
Oh, right. We got to make the joke. Let's see. 2 picks of mine, and they have involved vampires, cowboys, and dark lighting and soundtracks. Separated at birth? You make the call.
Okay, then. There was something else I was going to mention besides Carmilla. And of course the use of... Oh yeah, this was something I was going to mention. The use of Rococo architecture in Carmilla's castle I just thought was gorgeous and very appropriate, considering that Carmilla is supposed to be like an ancient vampire at that point. And it makes sense that she would want to have everything be like just grand and opulent and over the top, because she was around during that time, during like the 1740s.
And I think that it better serves the whole thematic and narrative beat that vampires are ruling this world but are dwindling. Like, the books make a much heavier point of the fact that the vampire nobles are trying to return it to the heyday of their reign centuries and centuries ago. But the first movie, as I've said before, isn't very good at weaving that into the narrative or even the conflict. This movie, though, has a lot to say about the dynamics of vampires and how they exist in this.
Yeah.
One line that I love to death, in spite of its semi-hackneyed use in vampire fiction, is when Meyerlink is taking Charlotte back to his castle in his carriage, and he says something to the effect of, "When the last vampire falls, who shall mourn us? No one can understand this pain, this lonely existence."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do like the fact that it kind of examines the D's line of work being a bit screwed up.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's hilarious because the one posing this argument is the genocidal Carmilla, who wants to rule over humans and feed off them like cattle, but it is a nice thematic beat that plays well in the final action scene.
Oh, no, I remember what I was going to say. So, speaking of Carmilla again.
Yes.
Sorry, I just love her character. Also, dumb titties. No. One thing I did want to say is a scene where she's like crawling out of the bathtub covered in blood, by the look of it. That's very obviously a reference to the myth, well, not really the myth, but one of the many stories surrounding Ursula Bathory.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Bathory.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, her actual name is Urshabet. But that's just because things get translated all over the place. America. And also English language, it sucks. 'Cause there is a myth that there's no record of it being true, and also it doesn't make sense when you think about it for more than 5 seconds, of Urshabet Bathory bathing in the blood of virgins, which, when you think about it for more than 5 seconds, you're like, it doesn't work that way. There's too much blood involved. You'd have to kill like 50 people, and then it would coagulate, and that's a whole mess, and you don't want to do that.
Anime characters, especially in this movie, are basically wine barrels.
Yeah.
Like, you notice how much flows into Carmilla's coffin?
Yeah.
You haven't thought of the smell, you bitch.
But yeah, this movie is stylish as hell, and I do like the emotional denouement, as Daulton said, of there's a lot of parallels between humanity vampires and Dompiers, or Dunpeels as it's translated, because this was early 2000s.
Yeah.
But I like especially the way it's shown through the eyes of God, her name is eluding me. The huntress lady.
Layla?
Layla. I think she makes a good audience surrogate.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Yeah.
like, I do like how she develops a kinship with Dee.
Yeah.
At first, she views him as a nuisance. Like, he's competition and a dompier, no less. So, she wants to either kill him or just get him out of the way, like when she sicks the local sheriff in one of the towns on him.
Yeah, but then eventually it's like, oh, we're two sides of the same coin, you know?
We're both hunters, we're both lonely, and nobody is going to lay flowers on our graves.
Yeah.
If Dee ever has one, because he can live a long time.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a very interesting little relationship. But, yeah, no, overall, I thought the film was pretty solid.
Yeah.
I like the relationship between Layla and Dee because it doesn't go into one of those like, oh, will they, won't they, or some kind of like big romantic thing, and I'm just like, thank God it didn't, because I'm tired of that in these kind of things.
That's another reason I didn't show you the first movie, because there's a female lead in this who alternates between kind of being a heroine and being a damsel, and the teasing between her and Dee is annoying. It's so goddamn stupid. Oh, and it's time for Richie to bitch about how the books are translated.
Oh boy.
As much as I love the concept of the books, and the books themselves, in my honest opinion, are not well written, at least as they're translated in English, because the character in the first book and first movie, the way it describes her attraction to Dee, because she has the hots for him in spite of a disturbing age difference.
Yeah.
Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. Brace yourself.
Come to think of it, there's always going to be a disturbing age difference.
Yeah.
It's all an execution, though. It is all an execution, and the first book and the first movie is so cringeworthy, especially in the book where they describe her attraction to Dee as, and I swear to you this is real, brace yourself, succumbing to virgin instinct.
Yeah. No.
Gross.
Don't like that.
Gross.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Gross, gross, gross.
Not a fan.
Shout out to Oathbreaker, my writing partner in crime. I agree with you, that line sucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I do like that, Erin, because Layla is a much better human partner in this. Throughout the book series and other adaptations of Dee, he interacts with a lot of humans. They are varying degrees of interesting, but I don't think he's ever had a partner like Layla. Especially by the end.
I can agree, even though I haven't read the books or seen that much of...
You've got a lot of context for that first book, though, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
It's
not
not
breaking
great.
eye contact.
It's not great.
Like, these are the eyes of someone who has looked into the abyss.
When
Fair.
you stare too long into the abyss stares back into you.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay. What I usually, when it comes to characters, usually when it comes to female characters who are a female lead playing opposite a male lead, they always try to force some kind of gross romance thing on there. And sometimes it's not gross and it works fine. But the majority of the times you're just like, no. No, this feels like an episode of Law & Order SVU.
But they do not do that for Layla, and it works
Yeah.
because Dee, throughout the series, is simultaneously described as a handsome fellow, which, yeah, I'd say so. What do you think? Varying degrees there. But I do like it. He's handsome, but he's aromantic, and
Yeah.
deliberately so,
Yeah.
because of his line of work. It necessitates it.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean he's heartless, though.
It just means that he knows that romantic relationships don't work for him, so he stays away from them.
Yes. And it doesn't mean he's heartless, because the ending had even Daulton, I saw him going, "Aw," because it does a time skip after the vampire couple takes off into space.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
Yeah, that's a thing.
didn't think you'd hear that sentence today, would you?
No.
No.
But after they retreat to the City of the Night, which is a vampire city meant to be a sanctuary for people on the moon to live without the cruelty of humanity.
And they shot him into space.
This is ground control to Major D.
Both of you are on point today.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But after that denouement, there's a time skip. And Dee visits Layla at her grave, and she has long since had a family, therefore proving her wrong about there being no one to mourn her. And it's a really nice sentiment.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't think a movie would have an ending that optimistic with how dark and moody it is, but damn if it didn't turn it on its head. But yeah, that was Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust.
Yep.
Yep.
So you can come back around here. Spoilers are done, folks. Yeah, so overall, thoughts on the film. This was my first time watching it, and I thought it was pretty solid. You know, nice little throw on in the afternoon kind of movie, I would call it.
Yeah. I mean, it was that kind of setting.
Yeah,
over
literally.
here.
Sitting in the sunroom watching Vampire Hunter D because we don't have a lot going on in the basement.
Yeah.
In the
And
murder hut area.
I was standing in the corner like the end of the Blair Witch Project.
yeah, I will send a picture of that studio eventually because
What enhances this is the fact that like
There's torn insulation.
well, not
and
only
shit.
that, but the insulation has some creepy messages on it, like thermal and sound control and formaldehyde free.
John's Manville.
The scariest of all the Johns.
Yeah. And it is because of the walls that are going over this place that we are going to be going on a bit of a hiatus after this one.
Yeah, there's going to be a little workarounds in here. New studio is going to have a bit of work done on it, so.
And a lot of work on my end. I've got some birthday-induced obligations of my own next weekend, plus some other creative ventures that I am exploring.
Yep, I got some stuff I'm working on my end, and Erin has got some crafting she's working on.
I got a lot of crafting. I'm doing convention in 5 months. 4.5 months.
Yeah, so we all got some work to do, so we'll still be doing the podcast, but we'll be taking a little break.
But we will see you at the end of June or sometime in July, because I say sometime because I take vacation in July.
Ah.
Oh, yeah,
That's when I hit the beach. But before we get into that, however, I believe, due to the nature of the rotation, Miss Murray has Miss Morrison, Erin person, has...
Hi.
Erin person.
Has-
Erin person, that's my name now.
Erin person. But yeah, it falls to Erin, and has she got a show for us?
Real human, Erin person.
So I do have a show for you. It's an actual show. Come join us in the next episode in early 1930s Berlin. We ask you to come to the cabaret.